The mystery of the abandoned farm in Nebraska, scary divided by horror stories. On the night of the 23rd of September 1972, 4 inmates escaped from the Nebraska State Penitentiary, USA. They were Ray Carter, 34, Eddie Walsh, 31, Thomas Reed, 38, and me, Michael Mick Donovan, 29. All of us were serving life sentences for serious crimes. A few days later, only 2 of us would survive to tell the warden the horrifying details of what happened at that farm. This is my story. Me and the boys had been planning this for months. Our goal was to cross the border into Mexico, where we hoped to start an anonymous life. We knew we had to get as far away as possible, as fast as possible. The escape happened at midnight. After clearing the high walls, we started running south, crossing the endless cornfields and dry creeks, characteristic of Nebraska. I'm not sure how far or for how long we ran, but as dawn began to break, an old farm appeared in the middle of a field in Lancaster County. We were exhausted, hungry, and parched, and figured this place was far enough to rest for a while. As we got closer, I could see the farm seemed to have been abandoned for a very long time. The dilapidated wooden house had peeling paint, several broken windows, and weeds growing waist-high. The barn next to it looked like it could collapse at any moment. We weren't sure if anyone still lived there, so we approached cautiously. We decided to split up. Eddie and I would check the front door, while Ray and Thomas circled around to the back in case anyone tried to flee. A few minutes later, Eddie confirmed it was empty, so we all went inside. The inside of the house was just as bad as the outside. A heavy, musty air hit our noses. Furniture was covered in a thick layer of dust, and cobwebs hung in every corner like ghostly curtains. After rummaging through the kitchen, all we could find were a few cans of tomato soup and some stale crackers. The faucet didn't work. I told Ray to go outside and see if there was a well nearby. 10 minutes passed, and we suddenly heard Ray yell from the barn, "Everyone, get in here now." We all rushed over. The barn door was slightly ajar, revealing a deep darkness inside. Before entering, we paused for a moment, looking at each other, the tension clear on everyone's face. We were already on high alert. I was the first one in. It was quite dark, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw Ray standing frozen with a look of shock on his face. Then I realized, a few feet from Ray, there was someone else. It was an elderly woman, perhaps around 70. She stood motionless, staring at me. Her long white hair was tangled, falling over her shoulders like spider silk. Her eyes were sunken, like 2 bottomless pits. In her hand, she held a rusty sickle, its curved blade reflecting the faint light filtering through the door. When the others came in behind me, they also froze when they saw her. We stood there, looking from Ray to the woman, before I spoke, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who are you? Do you live here?" The woman didn't answer right away. She just slowly scanned each of us, her gaze as cold as if she was sizing us up. Eddie, the most hot-tempered of the group, lost his patience. "Are you deaf, old woman? My friend asked you a question." A minute of silence passed before the woman slowly turned her head to look at Eddie and replied in a low, raspy, cold voice, "I am the keeper of this place." Her voice had a strange timbre I'd never heard before. Eddie scoffed. "The keeper of what? This wreck? Thomas, find some rope and tie her up." Thomas quickly found an old length of rope and approached her. As she was tied to a wooden chair, the woman didn't resist or say a word. She just continued to stare at Eddie with an emotionless expression, a chilling calmness. A shiver ran down my spine. Something was terribly wrong with this woman. My father was a violent man, and living with him had taught me how to recognize danger. My instincts told me this woman was worse than anything I had ever faced. Still, I kept these thoughts to myself. Showing weakness in front of the others was not an option. As the group prepared to share our meager food, Eddie turned to the woman and growled, "What's your story, old lady? Why are you living in a god-forsaken place like this?" The woman didn't reply immediately. She just sat there, glaring at Eddie with her unwavering eyes. When she finally spoke, her hoarse voice filled the silence of the barn, sounding like gravel grinding together. "Since it seems you'll be here for a while, let me tell you a story," she began. "I was born in a small town in Louisiana, in an era you only know from books. Centuries ago, something terrible happened to me, a curse that has bound me to this land. It has made it impossible for me to leave. I no longer fear death. But, ironically, I cannot die. Every day that passes is another day I must endure this wretched, endless existence. She paused, her sunken eyes sweeping over each of us, and I felt as if she were peering into our very souls. Judging by your tired state and dirty clothes, I know where you came from. I don't care about your plans or the sins you've committed. I have only one piece of advice. Leave this place before the sun sets. If you don't, the thing that lives in the darkness will come for you. Just then, Thomas startled us as he walked in with a bucket of clear well water. Found some, he said cheerfully, but then fell silent when he sensed the tense atmosphere in the barn. Eddie let out a loud laugh, trying to brush off the growing unease. Crazy old woman. Thomas, bring the water here. The woman's words and the way she said them terrified me. This wasn't the way a simple mad person talks or behaves. There was a cold, ancient wisdom in her voice. I glanced over at her. She had lowered her head and fallen silent, as if she had said all that needed to be said. We found a corner of the barn with a little light filtering through to sit down and eat. We passed around the cold cans of tomato soup and shared the stale crackers. Eddie and Ray tried to make light-hearted conversation, talking about the beaches in Mexico and the new lives that awaited us, but I couldn't shake the creeping sense of dread. This woman, even tied up, radiated a deadly danger. After we finished eating, I spoke up, my voice low. We need to set up a watch. Someone should go up to the loft. This area is open for miles, so it's best to wait until it's completely dark before we move so we don't get spotted. We intentionally walked upstream to throw off any tracking dogs, but we can't be too careful. Thomas volunteered for the first watch. While he climbed up to the loft, the rest of us found piles of dry hay to lie on, trying to get some sleep. The next thing I remember was Ray shaking me hard by the shoulder. "Mick, wake up. It's your turn." He said he had just finished his shift, which meant I had been asleep for several hours. As I walked toward the ladder leading to the loft, I glanced at the woman. She was staring at me again, her face still impassive and cold. She seemed completely unconcerned about being tied to a chair by 4 escaped convicts, with no idea what would happen next. Her calmness was more frightening than any threat. Once in the loft, I looked out through a crack in the wooden wall. The sky was turning the orange-red of late afternoon, which meant we would have to leave in a few hours. I wondered what Eddie planned to do with the old woman before we left. Kill her, or just leave her here? I sat down on a wooden barrel that Thomas and Ray had been using for lookout and drifted into my thoughts. Suddenly, I jolted awake. I had dozed off. I jumped off the barrel, horrified to see that it was nearly dusk outside. Damn it, how could I have fallen asleep? I scrambled down the ladder, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The others must have still been asleep, or they would have woken me. When my feet hit the ground, I looked toward the woman's chair, and then my heart stopped. She was gone. I rushed over to the chair to check. The rope we had used to tie her had been sliced into pieces, lying neatly on the floor as if cut by a sharp knife. "Wake up, everybody, get up," I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. In seconds, the other 3 were by my side, their eyes wide with the same shock I felt. Thomas was the one who had tied her, and he muttered, "No way, I tied it so tight." Darkness quickly enveloped the inside of the barn. I turned to Eddie. "What do we do now?" Just as I finished speaking, a strange sound came from a dark corner at the back of the barn, a scraping sound, as if the claws of a large animal were scratching against the wooden planks. Ray, the most timid of us, stammered, "Eddie, let's get out of here. It's too dark, and it's time to go anyway." "I'm not leaving until I've taught that old woman a lesson," Eddie growled, trying to sound tough. "She knows we're escaped convicts. She's definitely hiding back there. If you're too scared, just wait here." "Fine, but hurry the hell up," I replied, my voice trembling. Eddie began to cautiously move toward the back of the barn. There were at least 2 or 3 small stalls and a few old feeding troughs back there. Eddie always acted like he was fearless, but deep down, I knew he was just a coward trying to hide his fear. The 3 of us stood there, holding our breath, watching Eddie disappear into the deep darkness. The only light now came from the faint, silvery slivers of the rising moon, filtering through the cracks of the decaying barn walls. I was sweating, my whole body shaking with fear, feeling like I might pass out. Suddenly, we heard a low, savage growl, followed by Eddie's terrified scream, "What the hell are you?" "AAA," His scream was cut short abruptly. We didn't waste a second. "Run," I yelled. We turned and bolted toward the large barn doors just a few feet away. But when we slammed into them, they didn't budge. They were locked solid. We fumbled around in the dark, trying to figure out why. A large wooden bar had been slid across from the outside, trapping us inside. Damn it! "What do we do now?" Thomas asked in despair. "Find another way out. Come on, we have to get out of here now," I urged. We started feeling our way along the walls, hoping to find a loose board or a gap. Suddenly, I heard that growl again, this time closer, and the sound of something running very fast toward us. "What is that?" I screamed in panic. Immediately after, Ray let out a horrifying scream that tore through the silence. "Help me. It's got me." His screams lasted for a few seconds before suddenly falling silent, as if something had ripped out his throat. Thomas shouted, "Hurry, Mick, let's get the hell out of here." I didn't say anything, just ran blindly, away from where Ray's screams had died. In the thick darkness of the barn, I kept stumbling, crashing into things I couldn't see, nearly knocking myself out. When I thought I had reached the back wall, I stopped, turned, and gasped for breath. Around me, everything had suddenly become dead, silent, not a sound, not a movement. It was as if the world had stopped turning. A few minutes passed in that deathly silence. Then, I heard a voice whisper from the darkness nearby. "Mick, is that you?" "It's me. Eddie. I think I found a way out." "Over here." I froze, my entire body rigid with fear. I thought to myself, I heard Eddie's horrible scream. There was no way he could still be alive. The voice whispered again, this time more pleadingly. "Hurry up, Mick. Over here." I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't just stand there waiting to be the next prey. I slowly, cautiously, began to move toward the sound of Eddie's voice. Just then, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the loft area. It was Thomas's voice. The scream was sharp, then silenced. The horror propelled me to move faster toward Eddie's voice. Suddenly, I stumbled over something soft on the floor. It let out a pained groan, making me jump back in shock. "Mick, it's me, Eddie. Help me up." I reached down, my hands fumbling in the dark, and touched a warm, sticky pool of liquid. I brought my hand to my nose. The distinct, coppery smell of blood filled my senses. I fumbled around a bit more until I found Eddie's arm and helped him sit up. Just then, a faint sliver of moonlight shone through the barn wall, illuminating a loose board the way out Eddie had mentioned. We scrambled toward it as fast as we could, since Eddie was severely injured. His chest was covered in deep gashes, and blood was pouring out. When we reached the board, I pushed with all my might. It opened just enough for us to squeeze through. Once outside, we started back the way we came. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder as I helped Eddie along, haunted by the thought that the monster would burst out of the darkness at any moment. We staggered on through the night, trying to put as much distance as possible between us and that damned farm. As dawn broke, we were lucky enough to be spotted by a truck driver on the highway who called for help. It wasn't long before the driver realized we were escaped inmates, and the police were there to arrest us. I had thought Eddie wouldn't make it through the night, but the tough bastard held on. After Eddie and I told our story to the warden, he informed the local police. An investigation team was sent to the farm. When they stepped inside the barn, several of them said the place reeked of a foul stench, like the den of a wild animal. They didn't find anything in the barn at first, but when they searched the house, they were stunned to find the elderly woman sitting in an old armchair, calmly reading a worn, leather-bound book. When questioned, she just looked up and said, "I told them to leave." She was arrested on suspicion of murdering Ray Carter and Thomas Reed. When the search of the barn continued more thoroughly, they discovered a secret cellar beneath the floor. Inside was a horrific sight. Dozens of human skeletons piled on top of each other, including the nearly intact remains of Ray and Thomas. The bones had been strangely picked clean, with deep scratch marks etched into them. Over the next month, a full search of the entire property was conducted. There was never an exact count, but it was estimated that as many as 80 different skeletons were found at the farm, some dating back to the 19th century. They also found many old items in the house, some from a very long time ago. An old photograph of a woman with a face identical to hers was found. Experts determined the photo was taken in Louisiana in the 1,870 seconds. No one knew how or when the woman came to live at the farm, as it had been abandoned for over 40 years. She was convicted and imprisoned until 1985. One autumn day that year, she vanished from her cell without a trace. A massive search was organized, but she was never found. The family that later bought the farm property would sometimes report that, on moonlit nights, they would occasionally see the figure of an old woman standing at the edge of the fields, just staring at the house before quietly turning and melting into the darkness of the woods. The woman never gave the authorities her name. When asked if my story was true, she only replied, "I deny nothing." Eddie survived his injuries but had to have a leg amputated due to a severe infection from the gashes. His testimony matched my story completely. When the warden asked me what I thought had killed the other men, I took a deep breath, the horrifying image flashing in my mind again. "It wasn't human," I replied, my voice trembling. "It was a creature with sharp claws and eyes that glowed in the dark." For more scary horror stories, please subscribe